Okay, but consider this. If you have child labor and other immoral laws, and your discontent is very high, and you suddenly become bordered by a tribe that has moral and just laws, then you have to rapidly lower discontent or risk permadeath because, quote unquote, your people will side with the foreign tribe. Okay, now I would think that this has happened many times. Like you could think of the Ottomans conquering the Balkans. From what I hear, and I'm no expert, but the Balkan peoples enjoyed the freedoms of the Ottoman laws as opposed to the feudal system of the Europeans. And so they fought for freedom. But then, presumably the Ottomans became more oppressive, which is going to create opposition. If you try to assimilate, you know, there will be opposition. So, and then you could talk about Hammurabi or the Persians who prided themselves on their laws, right? Persians is like king of kings. That means that every man is a king of his castle. And the Persian king's justification justifies the other men's kingship. It's a legal term, or Hammurabi, right? So this is going to create uh, this is going to create the opportunity for the people to side with the Persians or side with the Ottomans rather than oppose them. Like if you look at the beginning of the Arab conquests, uh, the Arabs conquered areas, but they did not force the conquered men to become Muslim. They just stayed Muslim themselves, right? So they were Arabs who rode with respect, and the other men that have been conquered see this respect and they convert to Islam. It's when the Arabs start to become more heavy-handed that opposition within the Muslim world starts to grow, right? I mean, I think this is, history proves this. So if you have just law, people will be attracted to that. Uh, Moral and just law, people will just be attracted. This right here is proof of the statement that if you choose freedom, that will increase violence against you. Therefore, if you turn on freedom, you will have to expect that at one point in time, all your neighbors will attack you. This I was really high, and I just wrote it. Let's see, but the player could turn off freedom by corrupting the religion. Okay, the player could create religious schools that propagate the particular ego of the god rather than the substance, which is law and morality. These religious schools over time would corrupt the religion. There would be a percentage of opposition who are now deadly opponents of you. They could lead to permadeath if discontent is high. Their numbers can be reduced to the point of elimination, but I think it would be funny if you introduce a rogue prophet who could revive this old opposition. How else can you increase corruption in religion, right? You could have a pro-immorality culture. So you could start to fund culture that promotes immorality. This has the benefit of reducing opposition to your religious revolution. So therefore, the immoral or the moral people are nerds. So nobody listens to them. This would also benefit a conquest agenda, right? Immorality is about population control, and immoral people are absolutely dependent, right? Although they are also whiny. This is going to be a problem in the long term, in the long run for discontent, right? Maybe though we could create a linguistic knowledge 4, I think the number is. This linguistic knowledge allows you to transform the religion into a pro-slavery religion so that the people persecute themselves. What this means is this goes back to Exodus and Moses. Uh, Moses said that the wise men tricked the Jews into serving with rigor. So it was like rah rah, work work, man man, work work, man man. So the Jews are now working with rigor, right? And this is a pro-slavery religion that the Egyptians, but Moses was for rest. He was for work too. He was a hard worker. But he thought rest was also good. But, we're talking about getting rid of that stuff because you want to, like, turn the whole galaxy into you, right? Terrible. Although, we can have different wind types. This is just the traditional way. So yeah, no, that's what this linguistic knowledge would do. This is kind of like an Exodus type thing with rigor. This linguistic knowledge would dampen discontent but not get rid of it. Okay. We could probably say that an immoral culture would have average research time, with other factors increasing or decreasing the overall research speed. I don't know. What do you think about that? Furthermore, you could have preset religions set into the game, right? This is a fantasy world, so they will be fake religions. But you could also have the player create the ego of his own religion, right? So this would be really fun, I think. Give the player, chance for his imagination to enter into the game. Because, like, what's the name of his god? How does he describe his god? Is he the god of thunder? Is he the god of baby farts? Is he the god of what? Like, you don't even have to say god of something. Is he the essence of the abyss of nothingness, right? So you could describe your god, right? And how you describe your god or gods can end up in the dialogue, right? So, or like your god's name can end up in the dialogue. So I think that would be fun, yeah, allowing the player to create his own religion. We could also think about different religious groupings. Correct me if I'm wrong, but old linguistic groupings like Indo-Europeans or whomever have one or few religions within, right? So the Indo-Europeans had one or two or three religions within them. When they break up, so too, right? And I should have put two. So too does their religion, right? But new religions will emerge that will probably tend to be similar, right? Although regional specifics or other factors could create vastly new religions in this new world. Generally, though, these religions will be similar. This means that religious assimilation will be easier for some tribes than others. These religious groupings lines will not exactly match the linguistic groupings lines. Right now we are talking about pre-gameplay history, when the linguistic tribe who is now many was one. Maybe a part of them was conquered by a different language and religion. Now that in this part the language became a dialect of the original, and may or may not have incorporated foreign linguistic group words, making it a hybrid language to some degree, if so. Therefore, maybe one or more tribes that have your language to some degree, it will be easier to kill their regional identity, right? Because you can appeal to the old brotherhood's glorious past, yada yada, right? So you're appealing to this old regional identity, right? And so there's people who have your regional identity, but they were conquered by another group, so they have a different religion. So it's easy to kill their regional identity, but it's harder to kill their religious identity, because their religious identity will be vastly different than yours rather than similar. These new, let's see, where am I at? 9 minutes. These new lines on the map would not even be seen until a particular tech is hit, maybe religious assimilation, making religious assimilation a gamble before tech achievement. So what we should do is like, so basically, like here is the linguistic grouping lines, right? But, and this is generally also the linguistic language lines too. We can go along here, right alongside, until we hit this part, right? At this part, these guys were conquered, and now there's a new language line here, right? And so these guys are now in this language grouping. And so the language lines, you could just like, I don't know, like I'm just like doing it. Like whatever. This pen is, alright. So that's what I mean by these pre-game history religious lines, right? And they're gonna set at some points correspond, right? But then be different in some areas. And this is at the start of the gameplay. Furthermore, just like with linguistic adaptation, you could allow the player to recreate the ego of your god or gods, with that of a foreign god or gods. Right, so let's say you've conquered these two areas, right? And so now you have two different religions here that are similar, right? There's going to be similarities, so you can merge everyone in this religion. You can assimilate them into yours. But now you want to assimilate these guys, right? And so now you can recreate the image of your you can create the image of your religion to now incorporate some of these people. Now that's gonna create opposition. This will be a hybridized new identity, and there will be a percentage of your population who are faithful to the ego of your first identity, and will be deadly opponents whose identity needs to be reduced. So basically, you are allowing the player to create a revolution in his own civilization, which will have certain effects. In this case, your religious schools can start to slowly promote this new identity. This game, in essence, is extremely tyrannical because your goal is to turn the whole world, galaxy into you. And you may be adaptable, but your stupid people won't be. For the old gods, right? Every religious adaptation will create a new group faithful to the old religion, confined in or around the borders of the time of adoption of a new religious identity. We could also give the player on the tech tree maybe Linguistic Knowledge 5, the ability to hunt down and burn all the books of the old identity to help reduce old religious identity. Not only burn books, but also write a new history. This would also reduce regional identity. That's explanatory. These game mechanics allow the player to interact with another player's opposition identities. If the player can see them, this would require Linguistic Knowledge 6, which would open up a screen showing you the other player's opposition identities and the possibility of interacting with them. If borders are shut down or your spies exposed, the screen can go blank. You would need economic and or diplomatic ties. Diplomatic ties only would make interacting with opposition identities extremely risky, and a full knowledge of all identities can only be achieved with economic ties. Diplomatic ties only will give you a limited list and faulty numbers of opposition, but they can interact with your opposition. So therefore, the more assimilated and unified your tribe, the less opposition you will have, or rather the less opportunity for another player to fracture you. Okay, yeah. As an optional feature, we could allow the player to write his own short history, just like he can control the images of the religion. Now he can click on a button and a new history, which has most likely the aim of assimilation and unification, will be written. But now you have a group faithful to the old history, right? So by hitting the button, the new identity begins to be created, which will take time to root itself because many within the first few generations after the new history is written will know better. But eventually the old history will fade, possibly to rise again if you lose the game. Funny thing is that you will be killed by your old identity, right? So you are like a ghost in the game, kind of, an identity chameleon. Now, in this game, you are the lawgiver and the head of military and military diplomatic policy. Proverbially, you could do auto battle or an RTS battle that you control. This game would allow for specific upgrades to military technology, in which both R&D and supply and manufacture will cost work and or money. Right? This allows for you to create different economic laws, which will have different effects. You would start out as a monarchy but could switch to republic or democracy. Taxation will only bring a limited amount of money in order to accomplish different building or military goals. So I should have included building to this list up here. You are the builder and the lawgiver and the father, right? Well, father at the beginning. You're just the man who controls the republic or democracy, whatever it happens to be. Later on. So in order to accomplish different building or military goals, you would need to do so through different legal schemes. So in other words, you are creating a corrupt class of people who are benefiting from your shared goals. This has its drawbacks in that you are creating new identities that are also regional identities. This is traditionally diminished the creation of regional identities, that is, by concentrating all the new identities within the capital for unification and as hostages. This is done by building buildings within your capital in which the different regional leaders congregate. In a monarchy, the monarch would have a court where lords would congregate and buildings for lords' sons to be raised, right? And so these are buildings for lords' son to be raised. So the reason the monarchs give is that the children are to be raised so that all the lords know each other, right? So there's unification. But they are really hostages. Okay, but this king's court is also the beginnings of the idea of a parliament, right? So there's always something coming up. So new groups can be formed. If these parliamentarians get strong, you may be forced to back them, right? So sometimes you may be forced by your population in this game to do certain things or get permadeath. If these then you may be forced to back them. If you win, you will still be in charge, but there will now be new laws with new effects, right? In a parliamentary system, I think assimilation would be a hard sell, because assimilation generates too fierce of opposition, and that is bad for business. Parliamentarians are more of a greedy class of men and don't care about the tribe. A parliamentarian conquest would be conquering other tribes, right? Or you would be conquering another tribe, thereby controlling their laws. And then you come in and you create laws which create new identities within this conquered tribe who benefit from mutual corruption. And of course you're benefiting too, as well as your military and your buildings. So this would be more of like a parliamentary system. In these terms, a parliamentary conquest does not affect another tribe's identity one iota, right? So this conquered tribe still has their identity. It just pisses them off. So a parliamentary system can be good for your personal economy, which is what the substance of your laws will be aimed at. What is good for your personal economy. Speaking of a parliamentary system, we could create Linguistic Knowledge 7, which allows the players the beginnings of advertising, which allows players to turn freedom into tyranny, tyranny into freedom, hatred is no love, so on and so forth. Your religion would have to be very corrupt for this to take effect, but this would be propaganda, right? A good thing about propaganda is that all the identities that exist at the time propaganda is discovered can be wiped out because propaganda can be used against them. But new identities will be immune because they can now use propaganda against you, right? Depending on the identity, the new identity may be a small percentage of your society, but their increase or decrease would be the effect of other factors rather than propaganda. Oh, I need to stop right here. Identity. Propaganda would be a tool of population control in order to dampen discontent. Its identity-killing properties can only be used on non-propagandistic identities. If you do not have propaganda and your neighbor does, you would want to rapidly lower discontent. And I think we will stop right there for right now.